Hi, welcome. Today's lesson is on limiting reactants, and this is part 1 of our lesson. So let's make some hot dogs. I'm a little hungry. How about you? So I go to the store and I buy a package of hot dogs. I also am at the store and pick up some hot dog buns so I can make my hot dogs. But if I look at the serving size, I get 10 hot dogs from my package, but I only get 8 buns. So I can only make 8 full hot dogs. Wow, that seems like bad packaging. That's something called a limiting reactant. I will run out of hot dog buns first. I can only make 8 full hot dogs with buns, and I will end up with an excess of just plain old hot dogs by themselves, 2 of them without any buns. Well, the same thing happens in chemistry. When I have a chemical reaction, instead of hot dogs and hot dog buns, I have things like hydrogen and oxygen. So I can burn hydrogen and oxygen and make water vapor. We did that in our mini rockets that we did in the hallway. And what if I have some hydrogen and I have some oxygen? One of them is always going to run out first, unless you've made some very careful calculations to get the exact right amount of each. So let's say I have a problem that says this: how many grams of water can be made from 38.9 grams of hydrogen, and we haven't had this and before, and 45 grams of oxygen? Well, if I mix these two together, likely one of them is going to run out first. I need to figure out which one and how much water can I make. So how do I go about doing that? Well, I'm glad you asked. I'm going to set that into 2 problems. How much water can I make from the hydrogen, and how much water can I make from the oxygen? And then I am stuck with producing whichever is the least amount. Just like in my hot dog example, I had 10 hot dogs but only 8 buns. So I'm limited by the one that I'm going to run out first. So I was limited by the hot dog buns. So I could only make 8. Even though I had 10 hot dogs, I could still only make 8 full hot dogs with buns. So I'm going to do the same thing with chemicals. Which one makes the least amount of hot dogs, or which of them makes the least amount of water in this example? So these are problems like you've done before. I'm going to split it into 2 problems. So this one problem, how many grams of water can be made from 38.9 grams of hydrogen and 45 grams of oxygen, I'm going to split this into 2 problems. How many grams of water can be made from just the hydrogen, the 38.9 grams of hydrogen, and how many grams of water can be made from 45 grams of oxygen? And then whichever number is smaller is the amount of water I can actually make. So we've done these problems before, so this is just a little review. How many grams of water can be made from 38.9 grams of hydrogen? And here's my balanced equation. So I start with grams. That's what I'm going for, grams of water. And, well, that's where I'm going to, grams of water. And I start with 38.9 grams of hydrogen. And then I do my unit analysis. I cancel out the grams. I change it to moles. And then I get grams at the end. And you might remember this number's from the periodic table. This middle one is from the balanced equation, and this last one is from the periodic table again. So I can make 348 grams of water from 38.9 grams of hydrogen. But I also have 45 grams of oxygen in this problem. So now I do this separate problem. How many grams of water can be made from 45 grams of oxygen? Do the same problem again. I'm solving for grams of water. I'm starting with grams of oxygen, and I do my unit analysis. And this time I come up with an answer of only 50.7 grams of water. So how much water can I actually make? Well, if I could use all the hydrogen, I could make 348 grams of water. However, I am limited because I can only make 50.7 grams of water from the oxygen I'm using. So what's going to happen? The oxygen is going to be my limiting reactant. I'm going to run out of that first. So I'm only going to make the smaller of these two numbers. I'm only going to make 50.7 grams of water, and I'm going to end up with excess hydrogen left over. So there we have it. That's how I solved it. Let's review what I did. I'm taking the original problem, how many grams of water can be made from 38.9 grams of hydrogen and 45 grams of oxygen? I'm going to split this up into two problems. I'm going to solve both problems, solving one of them, solving the second one, and then I'm going to take the smaller of the two numbers because I'm going to run out of one of the ingredients, just like I ran out of hot dog buns. Your problems that you've been doing in the past have only had one given value. This time we have two given values. So why do we have two given values? Because before we assumed we had plenty of the other ingredients. But that's not always true. Sometimes I don't have enough of the other ingredients to make as much of the product as I want. So there you have it. We're going to try them in class together. Hope you took good notes. Thanks for listening.